is very exciting and quite daunting to have so many of you. When we first were chatting about it last week, I thought, oh, we'll have like 20 people, and then we've got some fantastic people that have joined us. So I'm really excited about the discussion that happens at the end. So the reason for doing the webinar, the first one is on resilience, but also we thought it would be another way for us all to connect as a community of practice and to share ideas, experiences, challenges, any innovations, things you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't. So, resilience. So just a few process pointers. As we said, as you came in, if you could make sure that you've muted your mics, there'll be a chance to have discussion at the end. We're recording the session, so just to be aware of that in case you do take part in discussion or you type anything. Please feed any questions that as we go along, any thoughts, anything you want to share, you can pop those in the window, and Lou and Kelly will gather those and we'll have a look at those at the end. This is our first one. It's a new process, so we'd also welcome any feedback that you might have. And we've got a Facebook site that some of you are already part of. That'll be another really good way to stay connected as a community and to share ideas. The Bridges team that you have with you today, you've got me, so I'm Kate Campion. I'm the co-production and innovation lead, really into knitting as well, which is why I've got this really sexy yarn. So we've also got Lou, who many of you will know, who's been at the heart of Bridges for a very long time and very sadly is leaving us in a week or so. She's the program improvement lead, and if you've done any of her workshops, you'll know that she's also this Zen workshop warrior princess. We've got Evie and Scott with us, who again, some of you will know. Evie's waving there. So they're both two of our lived experience associates. So Evie is an ex-trauma patient, and she always has crazy Czech remedies for everything. And actually, she was telling us about one just before we came live. Scott is an ex-stroke patient, also our communication engagement officer. And if we were in the office, he would be our office DJ. So I'm very much missing having him in the building at the moment. Kelly is squirreling away in the background and hopefully sorting out any technical issues that we might have. As a bit of an icebreaker, what we'd really love for you to do right now is just to type one word in the chat window, make sure it works, for how you're feeling or what's going on for you right now, wherever you are.
Can you see it, Katie?
I can't, no.
We've got disconnected, tired, wobbly, bemused, surreal, yeah. Opportunity, surreal. Stressed, lots going on.
I put this up. This is not how I am feeling.
Oh.
This is probably what I'm hoping to feel.
I think there's the plate spinning, lots of people juggling lots of things.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed, open-minded. Yeah, good to know. Juggling.
Oh, I've got the chat window, there we go. Exhausted, yeah. Overwhelmed, roller coaster. Wondering, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So, just a way to break the ice and connect a little bit. Go back to the presentation. So the objectives of the session are to briefly look at the opportunities that this crazy time presents. Many of the clinicians that we've spoken to whilst we were preparing for this described this kind of sense of feeling in limbo, and that kind of resonates with some of the things that you were saying. We're also going to look at lockdown as maybe a type of grief reaction, how that might be a useful analogy. And then the main bit, so what are the 4 ways that you can build resilience in healthcare teams? And one of the key things is finding new purpose. Briefly look at why self-management is so important right now. In a very Bridgesy way, we're going to look at small steps, little things that we can do immediately, today, tomorrow, this week, because we can't really plan ahead in the same way that we would have done before. We've got some tools and templates to share with you that we hope will be useful. And then the most exciting bit for me is when I get to stop talking and we've got the Q&A at the end. That's really not so much questions and answers, but really just sharing expertise, ideas, knowledge. So we are in very strange and unusual times. But when we were trying to think of the opportunities at Bridges, there seem to be two main things. So first of all, lots of services, community rehab services in particular, have been dismantled quite rapidly, and some have been reformed into kind of rapid response type services. And there's an opportunity that when we put the services back together, we could make it how we want it to be. So there's potentially opportunity for service redesign, maybe big need for that as well. And the second obvious thing is the chance to do remote rehab. So when a new innovation or technology is taken on, the speed at which that happens depends on something called relative advantage. So if something is new and it's much better than the old way of doing it, then it gets taken on quite quickly. And certainly at the moment, we can't go and see patients face to face. The relative advantage is huge. So it's a time for real radical innovation, and many people are just cracking on and trying things, which is really lovely to see. So there's a really interesting researcher, a grief expert called David Kessler, who in an article about a month ago now in the Harvard Business Review described that this discomfort that some of us are feeling, that many people describe, is a type of grief reaction. So we've lost quite a few things. So we've lost many freedoms, we've lost social contact, we've lost the ability to do what we want when we want to do it, usual routines, usual way of doing things. And so it's quite normal to have a bit of a grief reaction to that sense of loss. So this middle picture, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, will be familiar to many of you. That's the 5 stages of grief in the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model. And David Kessler is a guy who co-wrote with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So I don't know if any of those feelings or kind of stages of being resonate with you. And people will be going through different elements of this in different days and different weeks, thinking about our patients as well as us. There's also a kind of anticipatory grief, because although we know that this period will end, it's at the moment very open-ended and we don't know when that will be. And how things will look in the future is also very uncertain. And that uncertainty can kind of breed a sense of loss of safety, which can be quite difficult. There's also a kind of collective feeling in the air, and potentially a collective grief that can be quite difficult to get to grips with. And grief is not a linear process, so people will be dipping in and out of potentially these 5 stages. And actually David Kessler got permission from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's family to add a 6th stage of grief when he went through his own grieving process. And that was to find new sense of purpose or new meaning. So after the kind of acceptance phase, which is where the power is in acceptance, the next bit is finding a new purpose or sense of meaning. Someone's unmuted. So this uncertainty is a grief reaction. So one way to deal with that is to use this time to re-strategize and to think about what our sense of purpose and meaning is. And it's also worth bearing in mind that although we're going through the same experience, actually we'll also be having a multitude of different experiences depending on our own personal circumstances. So depending on whether you are isolating alone, whether you're able to work from home, if you've been redeployed to the acute setting and you're working crazy hard, if you're with family, childcare issues, relationships, what area you're living in, what country, how your supermarket is, how you get on with your neighbours, whether you're someone that's at risk of coronavirus or less at risk, all of those things will mean that we'll be having radically different experiences, as well as kind of experiencing the same thing, the same process. So this is why we thought it might be useful to focus on on something a bit positive. So resilience is the capability to recover quickly from difficulties, so it's kind of sense of toughness. But it's also the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. So it's a kind of toughness, but also with the flexibility or elasticity. And teams can have resilience, and resilience can be something that you can build into a team over time through systemic processes. And it's really important, not only during times of kind of obvious adversity like now, but also resilient teams tend to deal much better with change. Change is normal in healthcare, so it's really good to have and to build resilient teams. Being resilient, or a team that's resilient, means that they're constantly analysing potential threats and opportunities, gathering information, understanding the environment, what's currently happening, monitoring what's going on, and kind of constantly reviewing and assessing changes. So moving with things as they change. But how do you build resilience in teams? Well, there's 4 main ways that you can do this. The first is to maintain a clear sense of purpose. And this fits very much with what I was saying about the grief model, and that this 6th stage is finding some sense of purpose or meaning. So why do you do what you do? Why does your team or your organization exist? What is your overarching purpose or aim? And it may be that you can't do that in the way that you used to do it, but are there ways that you could achieve some or all of that aim in a different way? Can you problem solve? And this is really helpful because it can give us a sense of certainty during a time that's very uncertain. Certainly preparing for this was an absolute blessing, because it was something to really focus on, which was really great. The second thing that builds resilience is strengthening team relationships. So positive relationships in a team lead to an environment of trust and psychological safety. And it can be difficult to think about how you can build that at the moment when we're all kind of isolated, potentially working remotely and not in contact. We don't have those kind of ad hoc conversations that you have as you're passing in the corridor, or if you're in the proximity of being in the same office or ward or team. But there are ways to create that, and many of you will be doing those at the moment, and it'd be great to hear about that at the end. There's lots of resources online at the moment about how to do like a Zoom meeting really well, having check-in time and check-out time at the beginning and end. That might feel like it's a bit of a waste of time, but actually is really, really important at the moment. All of those icebreaker things, slightly cheesy team building things, all of those are really, really useful at the moment. Conflict inevitably occurs in teams. But it's really important that teams can communicate and be honest in an open way, particularly when they're working online and connecting online potentially. The next thing, which is really important, is facilitating learning. So resilient teams are really good at reframing challenges into learning opportunities. So actually, there's lots of free resources online, lots of webinars, virtual meetings. I mean, all of you guys being available and joining us today is a really good example. It's really exciting, it's really brilliant, because you can connect people that previously you wouldn't have been able to get in the same place or in the same room. So there are opportunities there. And potentially, I know some of you will be really, really busy, but certainly other people that we've spoken to in community teams, there's this sense of being in this kind of waiting period where you're anticipating there's going to be lots happening, but at the moment, actually you've got time to do things. So maybe it is a good time to think about where the learning opportunities are, whether there's anything that you can do either collectively as a team or individually to feel like you're kind of moving forwards and developing. The final element of building a resilient team is leveraging the diversity that you have in your team. So different skill sets and perspectives and experiences facilitate a greater situational awareness, which is really important at the moment, and better decision making. And they also create better opportunities for creativity and for action. And we're hoping that the diversity that we have here with all of you is also going to be a really useful learning platform. Okay, So that's how you build resilience. I'm going to briefly look at self-management, and then we're going to go into some of the tools and how you can start to foster some of that resilience. So this might be a little bit obvious, but why self-management now? Because we're all doing it already to some extent, whether that's we're doing it really well or we're not doing it very well, people are self-managing. And self-management support, just as a little recap for what we understand as self-management support, is supporting people with various health conditions to live well, and supporting people to develop skills and confidence. So self-management skills and confidence or self-efficacy to live well. And that can totally be done, a lot of that can totally be done remotely. So there's opportunity there. The other thing is that if you are doing remote rehab and you're talking to people over the phone or via video, then obviously your communication skills become even more crucial. You'll want those conversations to have as much impact as they possibly can, which is another place in which self-management can hopefully help. So some of you will have seen the really lovely video that Ella Clark put together for us with the support of the Bridges team, which is just a short video, but it's got some ideas for those communication strategies. So how to make sure that those interactions have as much impact as possible. So asking things like, what feels different this week to last week? How have you got through difficult situations before? This is the link for the video, and we used a LEARN acronym. So listen, explore, acknowledge, reflect, and next steps. Okay. The next reason why it's useful to look at self-management now is because when health services are put back together, they will probably look quite different. So as well as there being an opportunity to redesign, there will potentially be a need to redesign. This is my lunch from yesterday. There's a reason behind it. So Fiona was talking to a friend of hers, Philippa Cousins, who's a community rehab team manager, and she used a lovely analogy that she's allowed us to use today, so thank you, Philippa, about how thinking about how you're going to put the team back together is like doing a beans jigsaw, which is quite tricky. So you're putting the corners in at the moment, you're starting to get the edges in, but what the rest looks like is still quite unclear. And I'm sure some of you will have seen last week, the CSP described, so I couldn't find a tsunami picture, so we've got a wave, but the CSP described that there would potentially be a tsunami of patients requiring, in particular, community rehab, because you've got all of those people that were discharged from community teams when the services were dismantled. You've got people that were potentially more quickly discharged from hospital to make space, to make beds available, who potentially would normally have been referred to community rehab teams. You've got those people who were probably doing quite well and managing with long-term conditions like Parkinson's or MS, but like all of us, are maybe finding it more difficult to stay active and to cope in the ways that they were coping well before. You've got people who are getting unwell and not presenting to hospital. So as some of you will be aware, the numbers of people presenting to hospital with stroke and heart attack is massively reduced, which is really interesting, because you kind of wonder where those people are. And those are numbers that are really easy to see, but I would imagine that that's indicative of people with other health conditions also not presenting to hospital in the same way, for quite normal, natural reasons that they don't want to be put at risk. But potentially that's another group of people that further down the line may need community rehab. And then you've got COVID-19 patients who have survived ITU, potentially with a 2 or 3 week ITU stay, with the physical, emotional and psychological effects of that. So potentially lower self-efficacy, deconditioning. So there will be huge demand, we would imagine. So how are services going to cope with that? So embedding self-management into the processes and looking ahead to that is going to be really important. The other two things that I just wanted to pull out were self-discovery and self-efficacy, which are probably not new terms. They're both key elements of self-management. So self-discovery is just having a go at something and just testing it out and just taking action and seeing how it goes. And it's one of the self-management skills. And self-efficacy is really central to the Bridges principles. So that's your belief in your ability to do a particular thing. And if you have really high self-efficacy, then you're probably going to be really good at self-management, and you're going to have lots of those self-management skills or be able to develop those. And if you've got really low self-efficacy, you're going to be someone who's less likely to have a go at stuff. You're more likely to give up in the face of setbacks and failures. And these two are important for our patients because they're going to be at home on their own, needing to self-discover and needing to try and build their own confidence. But also they're really important for us because we're having to work in really different ways, like doing this webinar now. So it's really important for us to develop those skills as well. Now, but where do you start with all of that? With trying to build resilience and with trying to embed self-management into your services? Well, obviously the first step is small steps. So that's again central to the Bridges principles, is taking small bite-sized steps, starting somewhere, setting really small targets. It's something that can be useful to use with patients, but also for ourselves when we're planning and looking ahead to the future. We're going to go through these in a little bit more detail. The next thing is a SOAR analysis. So I have to say thank you to Tess for your contribution with this. We were looking originally at a SWOT analysis, and this is a slightly different version of a SWOT analysis. So the SWOT analysis is the four, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. This is a slightly more kind of positive, less top-down way of doing that. We're going to look briefly at PDSA cycles, so plan, do, study, act. And then some of you, if you've looked at any of the information around doing really good remote consultations, they advise that you look at it as implementing any kind of quality improvement project. So use the quality improvement tools that you already have, that your organisation already uses. So these are the small steps. So this is a page out of one of the Bridges books, and it's also available as a PDF. And here's an example for how you might use it for your service rather than using it for an individual patient. So Lou helped to give us an example here. So this is an example of setting up remote follow-up service for stroke patients discharged from inpatient rehab. So the first step is the MDT meeting, agree to a purpose of remote follow-up, design supporting team processes and paperwork, MDT meeting, agree a start date with referring teams. The first week is a trial run, schedule another meeting to look at how that went. And what's really important is the last bit, is step 6 is repeating step 5. So with all of these kind of quality improvement types of tools, you're looking at doing cycles. So trying something out, a bit of self-discovery, and then tweaking things and changing processes and using those cycles to embed things. Okay, this is the SOAR model. So we've got strengths and opportunities, which will probably be familiar. I'll give you some examples of questions. So for strengths, you might ask yourself, what do you value most about your team and your service? For opportunities, you could ask, where does your passion for your work match with your team's goals? Then you've got aspirations, which is different to the SWOT analysis. So what would you, for example, what would you like to be able to see when you look back on this time period? I really like that question. And then results. So how will you know that you're successful? And so in a kind of practice what you preach mindset, Evie very kindly did this for us this morning. So she felt that her strengths were feeling listened to and supported at all times, that if she was to struggle with anything, that she'd come to any member of the team regardless of their position, and they'll always try to support and solve things. Opportunities, so the passion for her work and her team, and her goals match most in wanting to help others. So she thinks that she loves to help others in whatever way they need, and that she believes that her job that fits that. So the goal is to also help teams in any way that they need. Aspirations, that we made the best out of the worst situation, that we stuck together, that we pulled together and together found a silver lining and made it work. I really like that one. And the results. So for Evie, 3 ways that she would know if it had been successful. So one of them is just to ask people if what I'm doing is working for them and if she's doing a good job. So very simply, feedback done very often. I've never known anyone to respond as well to feedback as Evie. Secondly, personal satisfaction, so small things. So she writes down a list of things that she needs to do every day, cross it off every time she finishes, so she gets those small successes. That fits in a way with self-efficacy, master experience, and those small steps. And then thirdly, she thinks if she's learning something new. As she works along, she finds that it moves her forward, so that sense of forward momentum. It's quite a positive. I was comparing it to the SWOT analysis, and it feels quite positive, but actually I think we all kind of need something a bit positive right now. And it's a really nice way to think about making strategic plans with all of the team involved. The next thing will be very familiar, I'm sure, to many of you. So this is a PDSA cycle. It's a blank form. We sent out some of these blank forms before the webinar yesterday, and we can also send those out again after, if that's useful for you. So this is again a kind of iterative cycle. So plan, do, study, act. And we've got the same example. So this is an example where the plan is to design and deliver a remote MDT follow-up service for stroke patients discharged from inpatient rehab. So on the left-hand side, you've got the plan, so the what, the how, what changes can we make, and how you're going to assemble a team. And then you've got, and I'll let you read that rather than listen to me rabbiting on. I'll give you a minute. And then the do bit, so that's where you carry out the plan and collect the data, and you start to analyze the data. And so with this plan, we will test audio and video calls set up with each other. 3 staff will play the therapist and 3 will play the patient. And then afterwards, all 6 will meet up virtually to discuss the experiences. The study bit is where you review what happened. So they learned that staff and patients will need to receive some simple instructions about how to prepare and access video calls. And then the act is the change that you want to implement. And then you can start another PDSA cycle. So the change is that they'll create simple access guidelines for staff and patients before going live with a new service. Okay, that's all of my bits. So now what we'd like to do is, hopefully some of that has triggered some thoughts that you might like to share. So we'd like to hear your questions or innovations, anything you've got to say really. The best way to do that is going to be if you can raise your hand. Because there's so many of you, you're on 2 pages. So if you could raise your hand and keep it there, if you have something that you would like to say, and then we can invite you to unmute your mic.
Can I jump in, Katie?
Please do.
Because whilst your screen's sharing, I can't see everybody.
I'll unshare.
Have you got any more slides?
Only the like join our Facebook group, nothing vital. Hello again, everyone. Yay. It's much nicer seeing everyone.
Okay, so the other thing is not everybody has their camera on. So maybe
so you need to turn your camera on, please. Now.
You can also make use of the chat box. So I've been looking at the chat box as we go through. I think everyone has been listening intently to what you're saying, Katie, because
not typing anything.
Any questions? One question from Tess, which is what is our new normal, which is probably the big one that we all want to know.
I don't like the idea of new normal. I feel like this is a period of change. It's not like you're getting used to a new normal, it's getting used to a period of change. What does everyone else think?
If anybody would like to speak up about that, if you could put something in the chat.
Rachel. Unmute yourself, Rachel.
Hey, am I allowed to speak?
You're allowed to speak.
Yeah, I hope that it will be a period of change and that people will have had to embrace technology, and therefore, what's amazing is that I'm sure everyone's found this both socially and professionally. It's allowed people to get together like this. I mean, you never have got together like this on a Saturday, whatever. I don't even know what day it is. I think the opportunities for MDTs to get together or how you manage those caseloads when all this is done, the fact that video potentially will be there in the NHS, which I think people have been terrified for years, to actually be able to, you know, those early supported discharge patients or whatever, that actually you go out and they're like, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm self-managed, they're all doing their self-management stuff, and you're thinking, actually, these guys are coping well, they're managing well, you can let them crack on. And you only need
and they might need a few pointers, but not, which you can do via video.
You can do remotely. Yeah, and it's really important, I think, to have the visual if they've got it, because I think that, you know, like we know, body language is such a massive part.
Yeah, and that's certainly in the guidelines that came out, that if you can do video, then you should do video. Yeah, and
I think it allows you to pick up on any vulnerable. I mean, that would be an interesting. I'm not working in that way anymore. It'd be interesting to know if anyone's having any issues with, you know, do they feel they're being able to pick up on the vulnerable adult side of stuff, you know,
and safety,
and safety. I don't know how people are finding that. It certainly isn't an issue for me in my private work, but that I'll mute and let people answer that question.
Has anyone done any work? Anyone got anything to say around safety? Anyone done any remote rehab? We've got any hands? Where's page 2?
I don't think so. No, I can't see any hands.
Can't see any hands up. So potentially, oh yeah, we've got Derek, who's looking not very Derek-y this evening. Can you unmute your mic, Derek Newman?
It's Sue Newman.
Sue, hi Sue, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks, good. One comment I would make about remote rehab has been, we've had a client that has been working with the services for about 9 years. And what we found is it's actually helped her really reflect on her responsibilities around rehab. And she's thought more about what she can do and how she can contribute to her own well-being, which has been exciting because she's been very critical of the funding that she's had. And I think she's realised with this has created this opportunity for her to actually take some more responsibility around what she can do.
It's interesting because she's just had to, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no other option,
So I'll unmute now. I'll mute now.
Thank you, Sue. I also saw Kay Bagley. You were putting your hand up. Would you like to unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm a Parkinson's nurse in Bristol, and Phil's actually my manager for Phil Cousins. So I work closely with Phil. I've started videoing with patients. I normally run clinics. So I'm still quite busy. And whereas I cancelled patients from clinics initially because of the emergency, I've now put those clinics back into conferencing, and they're working really well. And I thought there'd be obstacles, but actually I've been able to get the patients to self-manage quite well by recording their blood pressures. And you can find, problems like supine hypertension and things like that. And it's worked really well. And I just really thought that there'd be lots of obstacles, but I feel really comfortable doing it. And the patients are self-managing really well, and they feel comfortable in the home environment. What I would say is their symptoms, they feel more relaxed being in the home, I think. There has been some technical issues with people with dexterity trying to open their mics and cameras. So that's been a little bit difficult. And also the kind of patients that the word self-management is really strange and is different to them. That, they're actually self-managing because they access their nurse. So we've empowered them to contact us if there's a problem. So, I'm learning more, that I'm finding this really interesting. But that's just a few observations that I've made over a week.
I mean, the word self-management is rubbish, isn't it? But we're kind of stuck with it. So it quite often sounds off-putting to lots of patients. Can I just pick up also on, you've probably seen that Claire said that lots of patients are preferring phone rather than video appointments. So it just highlights that even the guidelines are that you should potentially do videos, that obviously patient preferences and give people many choices. Thanks so much, Kay, for your example. I think it's really interesting because now the only examples that we're tending to come across are at the moment in private practice, because they're smaller organisations that are able to just try things, whereas bigger NHS teams are a bit more constrained, because you've got to think ahead. If we start to take on lots of patients and then we have to shut down again and dismantle again, how are we going to manage with that? So it's an interesting kind of waiting period when it's really useful to look towards the private sector for how things are working and how things are going.
Okay, anybody else have any experiences, thoughts, comments, questions? There must be lots. So you can either raise your hand and we will keep flicking backwards and forwards to see, we can put something in the chat box.
Should I keep an eye on page 2? Is your page, yeah?
Fiona's waving. Fiona, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I just thought I would just say hi to everybody. And I've also spotted the originator of the baked bean analogy.
Yeah, I saw Philippa. Hi, Philippa.
I just thought it'd be really helpful, Phil. Sorry to put you on the spot, but to just explain a little bit about how it is being a manager in this time and how you're coping with everything, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, so I said I feel like I've been handed a 1,000-piece double-sided baked bean jigsaw. Yeah. And I've decided I've also been given a pair of boxing gloves with which to complete the puzzle. So
it's a little challenging.
Yeah, it's all right though. It's going to be all right. It's going to take a little while.
And can I ask Philippa, are there any tools or techniques that you're finding useful to help you put that puzzle together that you could share with everybody?
I mean, certainly we've got our team very quickly. So our local CCG gave us Microsoft Teams almost immediately, and that's been a really good way. So at the same time as us hitting COVID, we've had 3 different community providers have merged into one. And so we've got 3 different services, sets of services, and lots of people to engage and get together. And actually that's been a fantastic tool for getting people meeting, and I was slightly late to the meeting this morning, and by the time I logged on, they're already chatting and sharing information, sharing ideas, and that's been a fantastic thing that would never have happened otherwise.
That's really interesting.
Rachel's got her hand up.
I just wanted to ask Philippa as well, like, do you think there'll be anything that you'll take forward into the future that actually has been quite positive that you think will transfer into services in the future?
Definitely I mean, it's great to hear Kay's experience. Actually, we've been promoting people using more video conferencing, and I definitely see that's going to become part of our offer to people where that's appropriate, where they feel it's useful. I think that's going to it's going to open up a lot more possibilities. And I think I was really interested to see that your example was around sort of stroke rehabilitation, because actually those people who are going to come out of hospital much quicker aren't going to have necessarily the same kind of input. Well, it's actually thinking, well, actually, have we got an opportunity to do something very different? Have we got an opportunity to provide them with access to people in a completely different way, and building self-empowerment into it, not because we can't do it another way, but because that's a better way.
A few hands up. So Joss, hand up.
And Cara as well. We can have Cara.
No? Who's the other one?
Cara Jade.
Hi, I'm Cara. I'm from Cambridge area, and I'm in the community neuro rehab teams. I don't know whether anyone else is listening to The Guilty Feminist. It's one of my favourite podcasts, and they've had an episode recently very much about the silver linings that you're talking about. And I do think that's what's really helpful for the teams, of like thinking what will also last. And I think the video conferencing is something I've been keen for quite some time, because I do quite a lot of fatigue management and the self-management groups, and because I cover such a large area, groups are really difficult to offer, because people in Wisbech don't want to come to Ely and vice versa. So I kind of really hope that these silver linings will last, because it seems some of that red tape about doing the video conferencing has been taken away or rapidly sorted.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I'm feeling at the moment.
Thanks, Cara. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I have a thought. So just hearing about the, service changes and improvements, and how they are likely to become part of the offering in the future for services, I think it's really important to try and measure the impact. And if you look back at the PDSA examples that we had on the webinar, and we are recording this, so you'll be able to watch it back over our YouTube channel. That when you're measuring the impact of these things that you're trying out, that will be really key in taking them forward in the future. And I say that as well because I know there have been some practitioners have got in touch asking about that, and it would be really great to have some kind of way for everyone to exchange how they are measuring the impact of remote rehab, telephone consultations, any other innovations that you're doing. And if I can talk, Katie, about the Facebook community group that we have. So
yeah,
a way that we can continue the conversation after today, after this webinar, is to join our Facebook group. So we've got a private group. We have actually put the link in the chat box. You can see there, Kelly has posted it. Or you can go to
squirreling away.
Yeah, squirreling away, or you can just go to Facebook and search for Bridges Self-Management Community. There's 3 questions to answer. If you haven't done Bridges training, don't worry, you can just say that you're on this webinar. But I'll be around this evening to let people in. And it would be a great way to keep dialogue going between each other, between you guys and with us as well. It's really great for us to hear about what's going on the ground, because we are removed from it, and without you, we don't know what's happening or how best to serve you as well, because we want to be useful in this time. So just a plug for the Facebook group.
Heather put something earlier on in the chat just a minute ago, just saying that, so she's in a paediatric team and they are doing remote rehab.
Yeah.
But there's where's Heather? Hi,
yeah,
Heather.
I'm here. Hi. Yeah, no, sort of probably a slightly different situation to most of the people here, but we thought we were going to be needed, like all of us, straight away into adults, which hasn't quite happened to the extent we thought, but it's left us in quite a sort of uncertain situation, really, where we haven't really known what our capacity will be. We sort of don't know from one day to the next, really. But I think that staff have got really sort of managed sort of various children's therapies teams, but staff have been really good at being quite flexible and just thinking, well, how can we offer something now? Well, we've got time today, let's do something. And we found, again, mostly people have been using telephone, but the feedback's been really good from parents have said they found it really useful. They've been able to give advice, and actually some parents, that's all that some of the reviews or the assessments they've done stuff, and actually been able to discharge children because they've got the advice they need. So that's been really positive. And also I think getting information onto sort of more information onto websites. Like sometimes it takes quite a long time to get things agreed, whereas now we've found like links to things that are useful, and people have made sort of new advice sheets and they've been put on the trust website really quickly.
That's great. I think actually what you're describing is really common. Jen's put her hand up, so we'll go to Jen next. But certainly people I've spoken to in teams have had a similar experience with not being able to do rehab, particularly because of worries about capacity. So they're kind of like, how long is it going to last? Can we start now? Should we wait? Are they going to be redeployed? And yeah, I think it's quite a common experience. Thank you. Jen?
So I work in physiotherapy, neurology outpatients normally, but I've been doing a bit of that, but working obviously a bit differently, but also sort of upskilling to be back up on the wards, mainly the neuro wards. But the point I was going to make was sort of on the back of sort of resources and not knowing how much time you have. And I feel like I'm in Cardiff, sorry, as well. I feel like we've been quite fortunate with our leadership in that we've got some really aspirational team for pushing forward like the community side of things and our outpatient side of things, which means that in this sort of lull, although I've sort of been upskilling on the wards, there's been other parts of our team that have been working to evolve the services to work out the video conferencing side of things. One of the things we're really trying to do is sort of pull together what resources we've got and what we need to make, what's out there already, so that we sort of know what we can offer patients in the community without trying to make more work for ourselves. So that's been a bit of an effort to work out what to do with all of those things. As well as quite a number of my colleagues who can't be in the acute setting for various reasons, so utilising them in their remote setting to do as much of the sort of remote working as possible. So it does just feel like a big balancing act where you don't quite know how long you've got to get something done, so you're trying to do the best you can in the short time, and then you realise you have a bit more time, so you're going back to it and trying to improve on it. And just like Heather said, trying to get things on the internet to make them more accessible. But there's also that concern about patients that aren't technologically able, and sort of how to access them and support them as well. I didn't know if there was kind of anybody had any experience of those patients that are perhaps struggling with video conferencing and how they've helped them.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jen.
And Arnie, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, yeah, so my name's Arnie. I'm a physio down at St George's in London, Tooting, and I work for a community team. And we've kind of had to change our service quite dramatically. So it was a falls and bone health team and then 2 day hospitals, and we've now tried to sort of merge to make a kind of rapid response and falls type model. And I suppose I just wanted to say the stuff you're saying about how to build resilience in the team, I found really interesting and really useful to then be able to take that back to my team to try and work out how we do that together. Because I'm not sure that other people have found, but as everyone's kind of gone through their own reaction to what's been happening, some people's anxiety has then been quite high and then haven't necessarily been able to contribute, or have found it really difficult with all the changes, like at work as well as outside of work. So kind of coming back to those kind of like 4 basic core principles really helped me to kind of just see things a bit differently, I suppose. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It would be great to hear actually about how any of you take some of the ways to build resilience in your teams. There are 4 ways. Hear about how you get on with those. Tess, you have some interesting points. I wonder if you'd like to unmute. Where are you?
She's on page 2. Come on, Tess, you're not normally quiet.
She's trying to figure out how to unmute.
There you go.
So I think, so what I've been talking about is, so are the CSP right? Apparently we were going to have this massive influx of patients and we haven't seen that. So are the CSP right by saying there's going to be a massive group of patients coming through, when you hear from people like Age UK that actually their call systems have been going through the roof recently? So it's not that people aren't accessing health services, they're just accessing health services in a different way.
Okay.
So I was wondering about also about how we can prepare for the change in the demand that we're going to get. Whether there's any value in understanding your data really well as a starting point. So is this a time where you can actually sit down and consolidate what your data has been telling you in relation to your demand, and then start to think about the types of patients that might be coming through and whether they're going to get what you guys have always done, or whether we need to be triage. I think somebody mentioned on the chat earlier something about triaging. So how can we use a triaging process to make sure that we manage that demand, and how can we use this change in demand to actually really revolutionize how we deliver therapies, because it's important to really make sure that we can continue to see these people in the best way that we possibly can. I don't know, just some ideas.
And self-management principles can be embedded into triage, obviously.
If I remember rightly, sorry to chip in at this point, I think the guys at the Homerton tried to do a self-management into how do you create a self-management triage system. So it might be worth us like checking back in with them to see whether they did any PDSAs on those or how it went. And but actually this is a perfect opportunity to start self-management right at the get-go in the triage state.
Yeah,
and time to, I think, be creative and even go like back a few steps. So I was talking to some friends in the community team that I used to work in, and they were worried about the influx of patients and talking about triage and how are we going to find those patients. And I was thinking, well, it's kind of like, do you want to go and find patients, or like it seems like a bit of a weird back to front way of viewing it, that we have to go as the like slightly paternalistic therapist, we have to go and find and fix patients. I don't know what the answer is, but it's time to really think quite big and creative and like turn things completely upside down. Maybe.
Like Tess said, how can we start to manage the demand now?
Yeah.
And Fiona, you've put in the chat, this could be the idea for our next webinar. Was it related to that point?
Yeah, it was just the whole idea of actually building self-management into your triage.
Yeah.
Something that we tried to do, actually, I see Karen's on the call working in Southwark and Lambeth, and in the community neuro team there, looking at the triage and the questions that you asked during that first triage, that first assessment, and how critical that is. So if it was something that people would be interested in, it would be quite nice to look at that whole area, maybe as not the next webinar, but a webinar in the future. That would be interesting.
So the plan is to do these webinars every fortnight, and we haven't got a plan yet for what the topic will be for the next one. So if you guys have got any ideas, or you can come up with anything, then please let us know. Again, in the Facebook site is probably one of the best places, or Twitter.
Or Twitter, yeah. So I'm aware of time. It's 8:29, so probably a good time to wrap up. Katie, do you have any last comments?
I've just got a thank you slide. I put that up. Let's go back to this.
And thanks for the ideas that are coming through about some webinar topics as well.
Oh, there you go.
Last.
Thank you. And come again with a friend.